Historical background of Indian polity. The British came to India in 1600 as traders in the form of East India Company, which had the exclusive right of trading in India under the charter granted by Queen Elizabeth I. In 1765, the company, which till now had purely trading functions, obtained the Devani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. In 1858, in the wake of the Sepoy Mutiny, the British Crown assumed direct responsibility of the governance of India. This rule continued until India was granted independence on 15th August 1947. With independence came the need of a constitution. As suggested by M.N. Roy in 1934, a Constituent Assembly was formed for this purpose in 1946, and on January 26, 1950, the Constitution came into being. However, various features of Indian Constitution and polity have their roots in the British rule. There are certain events in the British rule that laid down the legal framework for the organization and the functioning of the government and administration in British India. These events have greatly influenced our constitution and polity. They are explained here in a chronological order. The Company Rule 1773 to 1858, the Crown Rule 1858 to 1947. In the Company Rule, there were some important acts like Regulating Act of 1773, Peace India Act of 1784, Act of 1786, and 4 Charter Acts of 1793, 1813, 1833, and 1853. Under the Crown Rule, the important acts were Government of India Act 1858, Indian Council Act 1861, Indian Council Act 1892, Indian Council Act 1909 or Morley Minto reforms, Government of India Act 1919 or Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, and Government of India Act of 1935. Regulating Act of 1773. This act is of great constitutional importance as it was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of the East India Company in India. It recognized for the first time the political and administrative functions of the company, and it laid the foundations of central administration in India. Features of the act. It designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal and created an executive council of 4 members to assist him. The first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. It made the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal, unlike earlier when the 3 presidencies were independent of one another. It provided for the establishment of a Supreme Court at Calcutta, comprising 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. It prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. It strengthened the control of the British government over company by requiring the Court of Directors to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs in India. Peace India Act of 1784. The commercial and the political activities of the company were now separated. Board of Control of 6 members set up to guide and supervise the affairs of the company in India. 3 members will be there in Governor General's Executive Council. Secret committee of 3 directors was to look into political and military affairs. Madras and Bombay presidencies were subordinated to the Governor General in Council of Bengal in all matters. This act gave the British government a measure of control over the company's affairs. In fact, the company became a subordinate department of the state. Act of 1786. Governor General given the power to override the council and was made Commander-in-Chief also. Charter Act of 1793. Company given monopoly of trade for 20 more years. expense and salaries of the Board of Control to be charged on Indian revenue. The Governor-General and the governors could now override the decisions of their respective councils. All laws were to be translated in Indian languages. It laid the foundations of government by written laws interpreted by courts. Charter Act of 1813. Company deprived of its trade monopoly in India except in tea and trade with China. This made the company more of the administrative body. All Englishmen could trade with India subject to few restrictions. A sum of rupees 1 lakh provided annually for education of Indians. Further, Christian missionaries were also permitted to come to India and preach their religion. Charter Act of 1833. End of company's monopoly even in tea and trade with China. Company was asked to close its commercial business at the earliest. All restrictions on European immigration into India and acquisition of land and property in India by them were removed, legalizing European colonization of India. Governor-General of Bengal to be Governor-General of India. All powers, administrative and financial, were centralized in the hands of the Governor-General in Council. First Governor-General of India was Lord William Bentinck. President of Board of Control became the Minister of the Indian Affairs. The law member was added to the Executive Council of the Governor-General. Macaulay was the first law member. This increased the council's strength of 4. With it began the Indian legislature. A law commission was constituted for codification of laws. The act threw open to all, irrespective of religion, place of birth, descent, and color, services under the company. Charter Act of 1853. The act renewed the power of the company and allowed it to retain the possession of Indian territories in trust of the British Crown, but not for any specified period. The number of the members of the Court of Directors were reduced from 24 to 18, of which 6 were to be nominated by the Crown. The law member was made a full member of Governor-General's Executive Council. Legislation were treated for the first time as separate from executive functions. Questions could be asked and the policy of Executive Council could be discussed. Through the Executive Council could veto a bill of the Legislative Council. Recruitment of civil services was based on open annual competition examination, excluding Indians.